We always start with the second board and from the outside of your deck. Do not install racetrack boards until all main body decking is down and cut. This allows us to cut our zipper board slots and ends of decking without cutting through our outside racetrack board. To figure out where to start this board, you determine the overhang you want the decking to hang over the framing. The standard is 1.5 inches. Add the spacing between your deck boards, which is 3/16 of an inch. Example, a 5.5 inch deck board minus 1.5 inches overhang plus 3/16 of space between the deck boards equals 4 3/16 from your edge of deck. Mark it 4 3/16 off the front of your deck. Measure back at each end of your deck and put a pencil mark. Chalk a line between these two marks to get a nice straight reference point in which you will screw down your first deck board to. This will be the front edge of your second deck board or the first field deck board. Fasten your first board right on the chalk line you have on your deck. Get this board fully fastened and double check that it is straight. All of your following deck boards will directly reflect what your first board does as far as being straight. As a standard for face screwing screws into decking, we always stick with a 1 inch standard from edge of board to screw. This will apply to any zipper boards, rips, double racetrack, etc. that you have to face screw. If this is an outside board where the deck overhangs the deck by 1.5 inches, the outside screw will be 2.25 inches from the outside of board to the center of the joist, and the other screw will be 1 inch from the inside of board. Racetrack boards will be fastened every 16 inches, 2.25 in from the outside edge, and a camo screw in from the inside edge. Zipper boards will be fastened with camo screws every 16 inches along the entire board. Once your starter board is fastened down and is nice and straight, the rest of your decking will follow that. There is always a little difficulty keeping your decking perfectly straight though. One thing to do is measure off your ledger to your deck board, at each end and also in the middle of your deck board section. You want your last board, which is your rip, to be nice and parallel with the house or ledger. Check your decking every 5 boards so it doesn't get too far out. Also, to get a good visual of what your decking is doing, go to one end and look down the line of decking, and you can usually tell if the decking is straight or it is bowing one way or the other. If your decking does get off a little bit with a slight bow and needs adjusting, this can be done by fastening deck boards with a slightly larger space on one end of your deck and a slightly tighter space on the other end of your deck. Make sure to even this out over a handful of deck boards so you don't notice the difference in gap size. A few things to keep in mind when dialing up your deck board rips. Check for a straight deck board to use as your rip. This will make it easier to get a consistent straight cut on the board. Don't forget to add in space between deck boards when figuring out the width of your rip. Always cut your rip to length before installing it. Rips don't always have to be tight. We always cut out the siding so we can slide decking under it. You can allow a 1/4 inch gap between your rip and the house to make it easier to work with without being noticeable. When marking out zipper boards, you determine the width of your zipper material and add a 3/16 gap for each side of your zipper. This is the space you need to open up to lay your zipper down. It is crucial that you choose one end of your deck to pull measurements off of to keep your zipper board parallel to your edge of deck. Example, a 5.5 inch board plus 3/16 plus 3/16 equals 5 7/8, which is your zipper board space. When marking out racetrack board cuts, follow the same formula as figuring out where your starter board begins. To keep the overhang on your deck consistent, you should cut your boards back 4 3/16 from edge of deck to match the front. Use your straight cut saw as track as a guide and make a cut on your marks. When cutting out your zipper and racetracks, make sure to always use the straight cut saw. Set the depth of blade so it is just cutting through the decking material and not penetrating the G-tape. When installing fascia, we always cut fascia to length and get all the screws started before holding the fascia up and screwing onto the deck. When installing fascia, we use 2 stainless steel color face match screws every 16 inches. Hold all screws 2 inches from the end of the fascia boards. The bottom screw placement varies, depending on what size framing material you use. All of these measurements are from the top of the fascia. For a 2x6, 1.5 inches and 4 3/4. For a 2x8, 1.5 inches and 6 3/4. For a 2x10, 1.5 inches and 8 3/4, and 2x12, 1.5 inches and 10 inches.